Public meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Palo Alto Unified School District. The board met in closed session immediately before this open session and took one reportable action in relation to item 4 on the closed session agenda, conference with legal counsel. The board voted unanimously to approve a settlement agreement relating to a special education matter, PAUSD SE-21-22.07 in the amount of $172,575. First item on our agenda for this evening is the approval of the agenda order. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move
order?
we approve the agenda in the order it's presented.
I'll second.
Students' preferential vote?
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda order is adopted. The next item on our agenda then is the student board members report. Ms. Bernie, would you like to begin?
First of all, our esports club has a retro gaming tournament that started.
You can't hear.
Oh, my bad. Okay, our esports club. No.
Your mic, yeah.
Oh, I hear it.
Just get real close.
Yeah, put it,
Okay. Our esports club has a retro tournament that started over the weekend and will be continuing for the next couple of weeks. The orchestra has a small ensemble concert on Thursday, and the Math Circle Club has a math competition that they've been planning that will be coming up, I think, at the end of next week. Our winter sports have officially ended and spring sports are in full motion. Baseball had their first game earlier today and softball has theirs tomorrow, with all of the other spring sports to begin competing in the next week or two. There's a track meet on Thursday, I believe. Events-wise, we have a Jeopardy competition tomorrow for classes to test their knowledge against each other for the prize of donuts and bragging rights. Last week was Love Week, so students were able to watch a series of 3-legged races, pick up their mathematics forms, and were also able to marry and take pictures with their friends. And then next week we have a student showcase Spirit Week, which is a Spirit Week where, kind of contrary to homecoming, all the classes are going to come together and showcase the talents of their classmates through a series of lunch events such as a Battle of the Bands and a bake-off. And finally, Micaiah and I, we met with YCS Learn over the last week, and we talked about the microaggression training that they brought to the board's attention, and we kind of discussed ways that we could possibly implement that in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Acosta.
Hi. So since our last meeting, Pali has held various events for the student body. First off, ASB hosted Love Week from 2/7 to 2/11, and that consisted of multiple events during lunch on the quad and a red, white, and pink dress-up day on Valentine's Day. Additionally, ASB has also distributed around $8,000 of funds to different clubs and organizations around campus. Pali BSU is planning a school-wide dress-up day on February 28th to commemorate Black History Month, with every class wearing a different color. So freshmen red, sophomores yellow, juniors green, and seniors black. Additionally, Wellness is hosting Healthy Relationship Month this month and teaching students about relationships and how to differentiate a healthy relationship versus a non-healthy relationship through various activities, including trivia. Theater is selling tickets for their spring production, Peter and the Starcatcher. Choir is hosting their exchange concert with Green this Thursday. And finally, the Pali boys varsity basketball team is heading to CCS quarterfinals tonight at Everett Alvarez High School in approximately 25 minutes. Additionally, as Annika said, we had met with YCS Learn to talk about microaggression training and possibly implementing that into the curriculum in PAUSD. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Austin is joining us remotely this evening. Dr. Austin.
All right, thank you. It is very awkward to be joining remotely, but I'll explain that in just a second. First of all, I've appreciated the feedback and the emails we've received about people's thoughts around a variety of topics, including the eventual shift to optional masking in schools for indoors, which, by the way, has not been voted on yet. There's no change yet, but people are really starting to gain some interest in where that might go, and general loosening of restrictions for schools across the state and the country. And it's pretty clear that there is a growing number of people that would like to have more choice in how schools operate with COVID restrictions. But I would say this, with choice comes responsibility. And it was a major topic of discussion at the National Superintendent's Conference in many forums, both formal and informal, the idea of what responsibility needs to be in place for us to start to make these shifts. And, you know, sometimes you leave a conference and you've got a great idea or something that you get in the moment that you want to try. And sometimes it takes a couple days to sink in. But on my way back, I thought about some things, and I had to think about my own personal responsibility. And in this case, I've been on a plane for about 10 hours over the last week. I've been out of state. I've been in big group settings with other superintendents from all over the nation. And that was all fine. But I also landed today, and I think I owed it to the people in the room today to have a couple negative tests under my belt before I reintroduced myself back in with a large group of other people. And I think as we want to start talking about wanting more freedoms, we need to also own more responsibility, and I think that's part of it. So I'll be testing tomorrow morning, and I think that's a responsible thing to do. And the other thing that I want to say, it's not just about me. In fact, that's so not about me on this one. I want to make sure our parents and families know that they have permission to do exactly the same thing. And I'm afraid, because I almost felt guilty of this also, that by taking a step like this as a family, some families may feel that they're being judged for why they were gone. Was it a worthy trip? Was your travel necessary? It's really nobody's business. What is important is that if you were in a position where you had exposure that maybe requires another day or so to make sure that you're in good health, you owe that to other people. And I would say this for our families, there'll be no judgment. And if we haven't said this early enough, maybe I just hadn't realized it. Your teachers, your classified support staff, your friends will appreciate taking the extra day or so. And I know, because I told one of my colleagues I was going to say something along these lines. He said, well, expect the question, will they be excused absences? Or if you're an employee, well, you need to take the day off. That's the least important question that we have right now. I think really, if we can just start with taking care of yourself and making sure that you're thinking of others when you're making decisions, we're going to get back to a better place faster than worrying about all the details and the specific rules. So wanted to let everyone know why I'm in my office. I am in the building. I'm about 45 feet away from our board tonight. But this is why, and I want to just extend an invitation for everyone to take the same kind of steps if you find yourself in a position where maybe an extra day helps everyone feel better. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Austin, for making that decision and for your thoughts on that question. Next on our agenda is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on topics that are not on the board's agenda. We have two members of the public who wish to speak at open forum tonight. And if there are others, then they can do that according to the instructions on our agenda or here in person. One of those I notice is a student, so we'll start with Fenton Zarlengo, who is in person. Mr. Zarlengo.
Hello, my name is Fenton Zarlingo. I'm an 8th grader and I go to JLS Middle School. I served on the PAUSD Literature Committee right over there for 2 years as the 6th grade and then as the 7th grade representative. I worked with some great people, including parents, librarians, and teachers, as well as other students. We looked at hundreds of books and decided which ones we would recommend for the teachers to teach their students about, and which ones should not be taught anymore. For each and every removal or addition of a book, a tremendous amount of thought and effort went into the decision. And though I am no longer in the committee, the process is still happening today, meaning recently published books are added to the curriculum every year. On the other hand, my brother, with a unique learning curve, which requires him to read some different books from the rest of his class, has received some books with questionable content and outdated ideas. One example, if you are interested, is What If You've Lived in Jamestown, which is a book published in the 1990s about the first colonists in America, portraying Native Americans as less than the colonists. I feel that all students in special education, not just my brother, deserve the same care and attention towards their reading material as the rest of the students receive. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Christina Zarlingo, also here in person.
Hello, and thank you for your attention to my concerns and really a question for you today, as well as my son's. It's Fenton, and it's his little brother Anderson's reading that I wrote to the board about on February 8th earlier this month. And I'm here to say thank you, especially to Vice President DiBrienza for responding and for sharing my serious concerns about the racist literature that's taught in LII reading that's especially provided for students who need assistance and leveling with their reading. I also had a meeting with Dawn, the principal at Ohlone, that was extremely encouraging and that relayed some of the efforts that that school is making to read, to vet, to consider everyone in general ed classrooms, in library settings, in classroom settings, and also in special ed settings. I was encouraged by both responses, but I wanted to just hear more about what the next steps are, having become aware of the disparity in standards between general ed and remedial learning titles. I'm interested in a timeline. I'm interested in knowing what steps are being taken. I'm really interested in passing this baton so that I know that this important matter, this sort of intersectional discrimination is being taken up. And so, yeah, I've come just to ask, what are those next steps? What is the timeline? What can we look for? And again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We can't have a full discussion during open forum because it's not agendized, but I'm sure that staff will get back in touch with you. It sounds like that's already happening. So you should expect to hear from them on the topics, and thank you for raising it. The next speaker is Meb Steiner, who is joining us via Zoom. Ms. Steiner.
Good evening. This is Meb Steiner, president of CSEA Chapter 301. I wanted to touch upon two things. Actually, I put in my card to respond to Dr. Austin's comments about the responsibility piece as we open up. I think our community has done a lot of great work and partnered together to keep us all safe and open our schools safely. And I want to echo his call for that. I think we're all making choices based on our own risk assessments, what our family situation is, whether we have young people or old people or immunocompromised people or whatever whatever our comfort level is with the risk and our comfort level with vaccines and testing. And I urge us all to continue with all of the mitigation efforts that we have been doing, and to take that moment and think about others and how it might impact others. And also to be caring of one another and respect the decisions that we make. I think that will help our community in general. From the beginning, we've always said we wanted our schools open, we wanted them open safely. And by taking all of these measures and people stepping up and taking responsibility, I think we've achieved a lot of that. And our schools have been open and remain open. And it's wonderful to be there in person. I'm going to add a little bit now, sort of segueing back to my comment as a community member last time, and to hear tonight from the two speakers before me. This is yet another sort of touch point of how important it is that we speak loudly and clearly and take action to make our promises of equity and inclusion and diversity and respect real. And I work in special education. I've been doing it for 20 years. And I absolutely hear the concern and have seen it in some of the choices that are available for some of our kids who have different learning needs. So I too look forward to working on that and supporting efforts and a quick timeline to really take a hard look at what we are providing, so that all of our students, every single one of our students, is really getting the excellent education that we want to offer them. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our open forum speakers. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. These are items that are approved as a group without discussion unless a member of the community or the board wants to comment on any of them, in which case they would be pulled and added to our action agenda. We don't have any members of the public who want to comment on any of these. Is there a motion or a desire to comment from the board?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Student board members preferential vote on the consent calendar?
Aye.
Board members all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent calendar is adopted. Next item on our agenda is the first action item 5A.
Board President Dauber?
Excuse me, yes.
Sorry, may I suggest we treat A and B as a single item and maybe
Sure.
put them together? Since
Yeah,
they're so similar?
why don't we do that? We'll take up items A and B together since they both involve approving resolutions authorizing the issuance of bonds. Ms. Chow?
Good evening, Board, and thank you, Mr. Dobbins. I'm happy to put these together. These two items, we had a discussion about them at our last board meeting on February 8th. We had our financial advisor present as well as bond counsel, and there was a presentation over these, the issuance of the bonds in the Measure A and Measure Z. They're coming back to you tonight because it does need approval. Last time was a discussion item, and this is approval. And that's why you are seeing both of these items as action items. And they're both coming to you for approval tonight.
Okay, any questions or comments on this?
I move that we approve the items as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion on this? So this is for the approval of both resolutions 2021-2204 and 05. And student board members preferential vote?
Aye.
Board members all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No, so both resolutions are passed.
Thank you.
We will move on then to item number 6A, our first discussion item, which is CSBA Delegate Assembly, where we have a number of candidates and the board has one vote. Mr. Branza, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. You know, I always like to do my research on the candidates running for these positions.
Thank you.
Yes. And if I'm reading the ballot right, there are 4 seats available and there are 4 people running. So I move that we vote for all 4 of these.
Would be happy to take a motion, but first we need to waive the 2 meeting rule, I think, because
Oh.
this is on discussion. So
So moved.
I will second that. I feel like this is something that can,
We don't need to bring it
yeah,
back.
it seems like it's
Four
non-controversial.
candidates, 4 slots.
So let's first then vote on waiving the 2 meeting rule for this item, student board members preferential vote.
Aye.
Board members all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The 2 meeting rule is waived. Is there a motion then on the ballot itself?
I'll move that we vote for the 4 that are listed here.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? So the motion is to vote for all 4 of these candidates. Student board members preferential vote.
Aye.
Board members all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion carries, and we'll cast our vote for all 4 of these candidates for the CSBA Delegate Assembly. Let's move on then to the first of our staff report items, item 7A, Universal Transitional Kindergarten. Ms. Ofek? Or Ms.
Good evening.
Brown?
Yes, I'm going to be giving the presentation. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Palo Alto implemented transitional kindergarten in the year 2012-13 over a 3-year period. And then in 2019-20 school year, the board agreed and approved extending transitional kindergarten for all students born after December 2nd and before the end of the school year who were either SED or HUR identified students, which we did. Now, this last June, the governor passed the Budget Act of 2021, which requires that schools implement Universal Transitional Kindergarten, or UTK to make it shorter, at all schools. And this year, the first stage of the UTK was to implement TK for children who were born between September 2nd and December 2nd, which we have been doing. For next year, it's required that we extend that enrollment period to February 2nd. And then 2 years after that, April 2nd, then June 2nd, and then by 25-26, all 4-year-olds should be in school. There we go. Who are eligible can attend TK. So this is the 5-year implementation plan that the state has given to us. We are currently planning 22-23. The class size will be 1 to 12, which means it can go up to 24 with a teacher and an aide. The year after that, in 23-24, the class size might go down to 1 to 10, but that is subject to future legislation appropriation. Currently, we have a class at Duveneck, Palo Verde, and Barron Park. And we are currently waiting for the CDC to send us their projected enrollment for our TK over the next 5 years. Whether that is going to be accurate or not, we are not sure. So what I have done is looked at all the children who currently are registered for kindergarten for next year and compared it to the number of students that are in TK, and it's about 50%. So an estimate in the dark right now without the numbers from CDE is that we will need to add 1 more class next year. And we are going to add it into the area where we have the most enrollment, probably will be in the north. And so the district has received $190,000 to implement this plan for facilities and materials and classroom equipment, not for teacher salary. We are tasked with making up a plan for implementation, the UTK implementation plan, which I need to bring to the board for consideration by the end of June. So we will be working on that moving forward. And the other important thing to know about this change is that the credentialing will change for teachers. Right now we have multiple subject teachers teaching it. And there will be a new addition of 24 ECE units required by next August 23, except for anyone who's already been teaching it before 2015, they get grandfathered in. So there will be some professional development we will be offering and support for those teachers who need to get the units. So tonight, this is just for your information, if you have any questions.
Mr. Brianza.
I think I already know the answer to this question. I just want to clarify. If my understanding is right, we all agree that early childhood education is very important, and TK is another opportunity for that. And the state is telling us to do this, but they are not funding it at all.
They're funding just the materials and facilities,
Not the teachers.
190,000.
Right. Okay.
And they'll be considering more funding for 23, 24.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
And
Ms.
I-
Latimerek?
Also think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify. Different from what we're doing right now, this expansion will be to incorporate all kids with this birthday, no matter socioeconomic status.
Correct, to February 2nd this next year, and then
Yes, February 2nd.
eventually the whole year, all
Right, so
4-year-olds.
by adding one more class, we're going to be able, we think.
Yes.
We haven't seen the exact numbers and we don't, but we
Mhm.
think we'll be able to serve all students with the birthdays between September and February.
Yes.
Who want
Who
to come.
want to come.
Right, let's be clear, who want to come. Okay.
And it's not a full day program right now.
No, it's a 3-hour and 10-minute, mandatory 3 hours. We're doing 3-hour and 10 minutes.
And so presumably if we get more demand, then we'll produce more opportunity. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We have to place everyone who enrolls.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else? Whether you know the answer or not, you can ask a question. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Then we look forward to more on this topic as it develops. Next is homework survey results. Ms. Ofek? This is item 7B. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm moving on. Yeah.
All right, so we have a presentation here this evening that shares with everyone the results of our most recent homework survey. As just a point of reference, this survey is different from the optional survey that students were shared through Schoology in December, which had pretty poor participation rate, but it was completely optional. And also asked questions more around the tenets of homework and meaning and purpose and elements that we can work with teachers on in terms of shaping the way homework is created or assigned. This homework is strictly related to elements of the newly revised and recently revised AR for homework. So it's pretty cut and dry, and this is just a report of the data. More analysis will happen. We wrote the survey, administered the survey, and wrote this report within like 14 days. So more to come on that for sure. So the survey design, I touched on that a little bit. We tried to keep it brief. It's adherence to the AR, and it was required participation, meaning you had to submit your student ID number, which may or may not have, indicated to students that to complete it or not. So you'll see on our participation rates that we have not 100% participation, but it was administered in the school day through a course in the student schedule. Here are our participation rates overall across all 5 secondary schools, 66%, with a higher participation rate in middle school than in high school, but still really a good participation rate for surveys with our students. So the data is good data. The thing that is equally awesome about the participation rate is the distribution across the grades. So we have, with the exception of seniors, a really nice even distribution, which is great because it helps us to consider the validity of the information we're looking at. These two sets of tables here are related to the new elements that were added in this year around a 7-period day in the administrative regulation. So it states in the administrative regulation that we want students not to have homework due on a 7-period day, and that we do not have graded tests or quizzes on a 7-period day, formative assessments are acceptable, meaning you can be taking something that feels like a quiz, but it's not for a letter grade in your, or counted towards your course grade at the end of the semester. So I know this is one of the areas that our principals are itching to get the data on so that they can have a conversation with staff around this. And we'll proceed from there. This is the newest piece that was added in. These two pieces have been in for quite some time, although one of them was slightly misunderstood. The left side is or my left, depending on where you are. The long-term assignments due after winter break is a little bit perplexing to those of us who have been looking at this data because we end a semester in December. So we're curious to know or to dig in on this a little bit more, because does that mean students who miss time and are making up work or afforded an opportunity to improve or fulfill what is required to move from an incomplete to a letter grade? Like, what is the context for this? We know there are situations like that happen that afford students that time and opportunity, but we don't know how students answered this. So that is curious to us as well. And we'll look into that. And then this other one is the makeup work without penalty after an excused absence. We did get reports from site administration that kids were confused about this question. So we're, I think it's odd also that every level is 80%. So that being said, some kids did not necessarily realize what an excused absence is versus just an absence versus an unexcused absence. So mostly from the middle schools. So that's feedback that we got on that. And we certainly can, if we use this survey again, provide additional clarification with that question. The one question everyone's been waiting for, though, is the average minutes per night by school. So we are well within the 180 minutes or the 2 to 3 hours per night, depending on level, for every grade level, which is really lovely and really nice to see. So when you look at that in a little bit more detail by grade level, you can see, as many of us may have predicted, that juniors are reporting the greatest workload, but it is still within the time frame that is specified in the administrative regulation. And again, we can continue to look at this if we want to and see who reported higher versus lower and see if there's something we want to, if there's something to continue to explore there. But every student is individual in the way that they complete their work and their pace and distractibility and all kinds of other elements that factor in. So if you want to dig a little deeper for our high school students, there's the number of honors and AP courses that they're taking. This is self-reported. And this is just fascinating and a great conversation starter for principals to have potentially with students around the numbers of AP and honors courses they take. With this, again, we don't have a 100% participation rate, but of the kids who responded from the high school levels, we have over 200 kids taking 5 or more honors and AP courses. So that's pretty astonishing, because it doesn't even represent the entire student body. And if that's if you add in the 4 or more, we end up, with double that almost. So it's just food for thought and really interesting. We can continue to talk about that in great depth if we wanted to, and, think about what causes all of that. But ultimately, with this kind of information in relation to the number of minutes reported, I think we're doing pretty well. And then this is by subject, average minutes per week by subject. If you added them up across those 5, we're still within the total number of hours per week that are permissible, even with the 2 to 3 hours per night, or the 10 to 15 per week. Well within that. And then this is a fascinating question that was an interesting question because we don't know what students were comparing to when they responded to this question. So over the past couple of years, does your homework load feel much less, somewhat less, about the same, somewhat more, much more, right? But what are they in their minds comparing it to? So there's a few things to consider when looking at this data. If a student is comparing their experience this year to last year, it's a radically different learning environment. Kids were mostly at home, especially at the secondary, mostly at home. They had a shorter school day, and there were blurred lines between what's classwork, what's homework, how much time in the day there is to complete everything. And so you're really comparing almost apples and oranges kind of thing. So it's interesting. If you're comparing in your response this year, which is a real in-person live experience, to the last time you were in person and live in school, a 9th grader was a 7th grader. It should be somewhat more. If you're a 11th grader, you were a 9th grader. So again, it's interesting information. Not sure it gives us anything to act upon, but it again, like the AP honors courses, gives a lot to think about in terms of where our students are and their experiences over the last couple of years in relation to school in general. So with that, I conclude this presentation and we can take questions or comments.
Thank you. Questions or comments from board members? Anyone? I don't think I have community comment. Well, let me check. Nope, no community comment. Student board members, Mr. Collins.
Do you want to do?
No, I can start with.
Okay. Yeah, my one question, and maybe you can provide data that answers this, is we saw that the averages were within the limits, but of course the idea is that all students be within the limits. And so a question is, maybe what's the distribution of students within those averages? And then, is it a meaningful percentage of students who are reporting actually above the threshold that we're looking for? Did you look at that at all, or?
The data is being mapped for us, so we don't have that yet. But more analysis is definitely warranted. No, that's what I said earlier, which is we have more data to look at, but within the time period of the closing of the survey and posting this item, we didn't have that level of detail yet.
That makes sense.
But we can get it to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if half the students were above the threshold, if the average was above the threshold, that would imply half the students are above the threshold. That would be bad. But it still may be a meaningful number above the threshold, even if the average is below. So yeah, I look forward to seeing that. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Mr. Durow.
Just to add to Mr. Collins' request for when the data comes back fully mapped, I think it would be interesting to see as well, cross-referencing that data with the AP and honors information as well. So we have outliers or students who are over the 180. How does that cross-reference with the types of classes they're taking?
Ms. Latimer.
Yeah, I just want to tag onto that because anecdotally, as a parent of a secondary student who knows a lot of parents of secondary students, we've definitely had conversations around the enormous discrepancy in homework between kids who are in honors classes and kids who aren't. And so I think it's, as a board, it's one thing to have a policy that applies to all students, but I think when we're trying to look granularly at changes we can possibly make, we want to make sure that changes are targeting, or interventions are targeting students where they're most effective. Because I think if you have a bunch of freshmen and sophomores who actually don't really have very much homework at all, that's interesting information when you then have a large group of them that has a huge amount. So I think these data points that people are asking for, I think can help us as a board make sure that we're talking about the right problem rather than talking around a problem.
All right, one more question. In the survey, was there any sort of question to get to this idea of, is go read this book the same qualitatively as go do this segment of math homework? I mean, was there a question about qualitative approach to homework, and are we thinking that an hour of reading whatever and of the tested the D'Urbervilles is the same as an hour of doing, bio honors homework? Was there a qualitative aspect to that?
The question is just a face value, on average, how many minutes per night do you spend on homework? And there's no greater definition than that. And in our AR and BP, it doesn't go into greater detail around that either.
Great.
So it's not defined there. We've done homework surveys in the past that are more around meaning and value of homework assignments and the types of homework assignments that cause struggle versus the types of assignments that don't. That's a different survey.
Sure.
And doesn't necessarily lead to adherence of a board policy.
Sure.
And these questions were much more targeted and based on the language in the AR. So there isn't a way to do that.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Collins?
Yeah, just something I should have said at the beginning is that I'm really glad to see this item. This is the first kind of analysis of its type that I recall seeing before the board that really tries to get at these issues that have been captured in board policy for many, many years and that we've always struggled with. And so to see kind of, the actionable data and you guys digging into it, I wanted to say that I appreciated that. Well, I should have said it before I asked my question, so thank you.
Can I add one other thing too? And again, this may be getting just sort of too much in the weeds about, I think Ms. Ofek made a great point about every student's different and sort of the way you approach homework is different, right? But I do know, I think there's been a big push in a lot, particularly in sort of the social studies, English arenas, to give kids a lot of work time during class to work on assignments. And so I'm just interested in that. I know lots of students that I've spoken to parents have gotten feedback that they're not using their work time efficiently. And so that sort of feedback comes from teachers. You're not using your work time efficiently enough in class, and so then you have to finish that at home. So I'm interested in sort of homework feels like there's if we're making the correct changes in the district where kids are getting more support in class, then it sort of becomes a spectrum, right, of like classwork that extends to home. So I'm not sure if there's a way of sort of getting at that issue as well. But you might have an hour's worth of homework and then 2 hours of classwork that you didn't get done also. So anyways, I just think that these are sort of bigger cultural questions around how that may be too hard to get at in a survey, but it is something to think about. That idea of what teachers are, how kids are being supported to make sure assignments get done, completed.
Student board members, any comments or questions?
This isn't too big of a thing, but I know that seniors did not participate a lot in the survey, and I just want to apologize on behalf of the senior class for that. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Collective responsibility. Anything else from student board members? Okay, I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to echo the appreciation for the survey. It's certainly some of the best data that I've seen about the amount of homework that students do, and the fact that it's as granular as it is gives us the opportunity to get a sense about which students are doing how much, and so I'm looking forward to more analysis on that. The administrative regulation, has different levels of expectations for different levels of students. So ninth graders are expected to see around 1.5 hours of homework, whereas seniors around 2 hours, which is in line with that 10 minutes per grade, I think, which is kind of the fundamental idea here. And then there's an expectation communicated that students who are in honors and AP classes may see as much as 3 hours a night of homework. So it's, to Mr. Collins' point, we need, I think, a little bit more fine-grained detail to understand, how many students are seeing more homework than is contemplated under the policy versus students who aren't. So I would certainly like to bring this back once we have that data, because I think the board's interest is in knowing the level of compliance that we're seeing and the distance that we still have to go. So I think we need that level of detail in order to do that. So I expect that we'll be seeing this again once we have that data. It's a little, it's disappointing to see that at least students are reporting some, level of noncompliance with other aspects around the homework being due on, 7-period days and, the other items that we talked about. So it will be interesting to hear back about once you have more information about that. And I just want to, the larger context for this, I think, as I've said before, is that when students are asked, and this is consistently true, it's not asked in this survey, but it's been consistently true for many years. When students are asked the biggest sources of stress that they experience at school, the two answers consistently are homework levels, so how much homework they have to do, and also test and project stacking. We've addressed the second, I think, in part through block schedule and so on. And it looks to me like we may well be seeing some really good progress on homework, but I think we just need that extra level of detail to understand that. So I think to the extent that we're really making progress on this, we really are addressing some of the critical aspects that are causing student stress, and I think that's really important. And so I appreciate the effort to measure this and then to make progress. So thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay, then thank you again, and let's move on to item 7C, the LCAP mid-year update. And that is, I don't know, let me find out who that's supposed to be.
That'll be Mr. Lopez, President Dauber.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm looking around. Mr. Lopez, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Board President Dauber. Good evening, Board Trustees. I'm going to be briefly sharing some information just as the changes have been ongoing here with the LCAP. So for years now, let me start over, sorry. Ongoing changes have been occurring with implementing the Local Control Accountability Plan, or LCAP, for years now. For example, Section 124E of Assembly Bill 130 requires school districts to present an update on the annual update to the 21-22 LCAP for parents before February 28 of 2022 at a regular board meeting, which is what we're doing now. And in this portion, I'm going to go over a brief background as to kind of where we've gone from 2019, 20 up till now. So the 19-20 school year was the last time that the annual update was conducted, as the pandemic paused the traditional process of developing the yearly plan. In the 2021 school year, the Local Continuity and Attendance Plan, or LCP, was part of the overall package for K-12 school districts to support funding stability for school districts during the COVID crisis. And during the school year, the planning for the 21-24 LCAP resumed, and the goals and matrix were adjusted. This year, we are conducting the supplement for the annual update for the 21-22 LCAP. And the following 3.471 million is the total budget that we initiated the school year with. And currently at this time, mid-year February, we are 1.861. The way that we've been engaging our educational partners is through our DLAC and DAC meetings. We started in early October and continued through December. During these meetings, we were able to provide updates to the parents on LCAP, testing, our 5 PAUSD priority areas, and EL services. We also conducted surveys for students to gather their input regarding our LCAP goals. The mid-year update, we have the focus area that we wanted to align everything has been on our 3 LCAP goals, which are the high quality teaching and learning, equity and excellence, and wellness and safety. In our high quality and teaching and learning goal, in the elementary level, tremendous work has been occurring this year with early literacy Areas of growth and need have been identified via OG and BAS assessments. Math instruction based on the 8 mathematical practices in Common Core state standards and Bridges curriculum have been another area of emphasis. Secondary has been concentrating on implementing Common Core state standards and the next generation science standards through continued focus on building coherence and alignment in learning targets from standards. In addition, school sites continue to monitor the district homework policy, focusing on homework loads, which is what Ms. Opek just presented right now. Career Pathway continues to introduce and increase student participation in industry certification and civic engagement to diversify pathway options and career pathway exploration through the Creativity Card program at the elementary levels. Professional development has focused on coaching and professional learning across the teacher's career trajectory, including the induction program for teachers new to the profession, along with the TOSA support for curriculum implementation and coaching options for interns and teachers in need of support. In the equity and excellence goal, intervention and progress monitoring serves as the umbrella for a robust multi-level support system for students in need. From academics via OG and BAS assessments, EL services, HUG completion, AVID, attendance monitoring, after-school programs such as Ring Catchers, enrichment summer programs such as Rise Up programs, and student and parent engagement initiatives. All of our schools are focusing and working to create a foundation for our students to succeed. The wellness and safety goal, our healthy attendance initiative has been instrumental in the overall attendance awareness for our community. In addition, the relationship-based intervention system has helped improve chronic absenteeism with support of our counselors, family engagement specialists, district social workers, or social worker, and district nurses and site staff. Although it has been challenging this year due to the pandemic, our Wellness Center services continue to support student mental health and well-being at our high schools. With restorative practices design teams, our district mental health and wellness specialist has been conducting restorative classroom trainings in the school sites, and these trainings are also part of the restorative practices SEL curriculum sites are using, along with the Second Step program. In addition, our wellness coordinators are part of the team at the secondary level for addressing and supporting students during disciplinary instances. In closing, as we begin to update the goals and matrix for the 22-23 LCAP, we will utilize this information as we continue to work on better meeting the needs of our students. And that wraps it up. Any questions for?
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Brienza.
I have a question in general just about the LCAP. We have to, where is it? Do these, engage our educational partners, right? Those are meetings we have with the public.
Correct. Yeah, and previously it was, this year we were addressing them as stakeholders. Now that we have to change it to educational partners. But yes, it's through the DAC and DLAC meetings.
Okay, I figured those were the same thing. And are we, I assume are we still doing those over Zoom?
Correct.
And what is the time frame each year that those happen? Are they happening all year?
Yeah, so it's ongoing. So we started in October. We have one in December. We just had one last week or the week before. We have another one coming up in March. And then we're looking into doing another one in April. That's near the, and those are going to be more geared towards the planning and developing our 22-23 LCAP for next year.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to item 7D, which is the 2022-23 draft budget assumptions. Ms. Chow?
Okay, thank you very much. This item is the draft budget assumptions. It's our second opportunity for sharing this budget assumptions document with the board, specifically as they relate to the development of our 22-23 district budget. The first draft was shared at the last board meeting, and that version included the updates from the governor's proposed state budget in January and the impacts of those proposals to our core operational budget. Tonight's version includes staff proposals to the budget, and these are attached as a separate standalone item in the board agenda. They've not been incorporated into the budget assumptions document, and we will keep them separate until we've gone through them and the board approves them, and we will incorporate them at that point. So when we met with staff for input on the budget, there were a couple of criteria that we began all of our conversations with. First, any budget adds needed to align with the district's top 5 priority areas. They could overlap, they could touch on several priority areas, but they needed to have a strong connection there. The second point was that staff needed to review their existing program to identify items that could potentially be done differently, potentially be replaced, or were no longer optimal in serving students' needs the way we wanted them to. Those items would come out of the budget and then be offsetting to the proposed adds. So in looking at the top 5 priority areas, I like this circle because it strongly suggests and is the way that we all look at them, as there's no one particular priority area that outranks or stands above another. They are all important. So that's equity, early literacy, attendance, service to others, and of course, mental health. So starting out with mental health, one of the areas that was brought forward as an add for the budget was to add elementary counselors, elementary school counselors. We wanted to build the program at the elementary sites and felt that an FTE of 6 would allow 1 counselor per 2 sites and give us good coverage through that model to serve mental health needs. We also have a productive play program that we started this year. We used our one-time funds to fund that program. It has been very successful and very well received. We want to carry that forward. In order to do that, because it was funded with one-time funds, we do need to move it into the general fund. So those are a couple of the things you see under mental health. Under service to others, we have a request for adjusting food service staffing. Just so that you all know, what we're looking at here is that this year and last year, actually, we are now serving lunch to all students, not just our free and reduced students. So the numbers have increased tremendously from pre-pandemic times. We're doing this with the same number of staff, same staffing hours, which is really pretty remarkable. When you look at the number of meals that we are on target to serve this year, now that we are back in session, and again, this is counting our lunches in the few sites that have breakfast, we're looking at close to 1 million meals this year. That's really phenomenal. And again, I'm going to say one more time, same number of staff. So next year, we do have an obligation or mandate to provide, in addition to lunch to every student who would like lunch, to provide breakfast as well. So effectively, that's doubling the workload because it's 2 meals a day. So we really did feel that we needed to address this. On the equity area, that top item is the family engagement specialists. Again, with this year, we added 2 part-time family engagement specialists and found that to be something that was working very well for us. We would like to continue that into the future. And because we did fund it with the one-time funds, we do need to move that into the general fund. And that's why you're seeing that here. It's not necessarily new, but we do need to recognize it as an ongoing expense. Our SWIFT budget, which we are all very excited about, what I want to notate here is that this amount that is shown, the $180,000, is not inclusive of the entire SWIFT budget. The SWIFT budget falls into several different budgets within our general fund. And so this is the amount that is over and above what is currently in the budget for this year. So again, that's not the total budget, that's not the entire budget, but that is the amount that is over and above and we're proposing. On the transition specialist and job coaches for the VA program, these are staff that's being recommended to be added for the secondary options program through special ed. A transition specialist would be a full FTE, and the job coaches at the VA program would be 2 FTE. Looking at early literacy, the staff as well as our Sustainable Schools Committee made a recommendation that there be some additional support on the sustainability, in the area of sustainability, specifically education. We felt this could be best addressed through a TOSA, and we are proposing a 0.4 FTE for that. The Every Student Reads initiative, the ESRI, again, this does not just cover ESRI, it also covers ELA and other professional development. That is not the entire professional development budget. This is over and above and in addition to the professional development budget. As Mr. Lopez just mentioned in his presentation, that professional development is a very important action item in the LCAP, and this is over and above that $1.1 million already in the budget. We also heard in Ms. Brown's presentation about the expansion of the Universal Kindergarten Program, or UTK. Starting that next year, or expanding that next year rather, we're looking at a 0.8 certificated FTE, classroom teacher, as well as an aide, and that represents the 1.1 additional FTE for that program. Under attendance, we have bus drivers that we are proposing. They're 7-hour positions, so technically they're not currently receiving full-time health and medical benefits. We're proposing, we have an MOU actually with our CSEA unit to give them full benefits with the intention of attracting and retaining those folks in a very, very difficult to fill position and very important role of getting our kids to school so that they can learn and excel. And of course, we have the other category. These were things that fit into numerous categories. We couldn't pick just one or just seemed a little outside. Health technicians, we are proposing to add health technicians, 5 of those folks to support the health needs of our schools. We are also proposing site emergency radios or walkie-talkies, purchasing those, the equipment, as well as the ongoing service agreements for those. Predominantly a safety item, and that cost is there. A math TOSA. This would be a TOSA that would serve the middle schools, our 3 middle schools. District-wide TOSA that would support those 3 sites for reimagining math at 1.0 FTE. And then this next item, also very important, but it's largely a reference item. Just to point out that the cost of a 1% salary schedule increase is $2.1 million. This includes all staff and the statutory cost in doing that. So it's there as a point of reference because we do want to stay competitive with our neighbors and our salary schedule. And for example, if it was mentioned about a 2%, it would be double that amount and so forth. So just to summarize where our entire list of ads and offsets are on our proposed ads, the cost for that came in right around $5.3 million. We had some offsetting savings from programs that we would like to not go forward with because we think we can do things differently through these other programs that we mentioned. So that net total cost of the proposed ads is 4.45 million. Couple things just to keep in mind as we are going through our budget development is that our team was very thoughtful in bringing these items forward in terms of requesting them to be added to the budget. This wasn't an open-ended list, wasn't a wish list. It was instead very thoughtful and very student-minded, lines with the 5 district priorities. As I mentioned, the negotiated salary schedule increases, those are, we haven't got there yet. They're unbudgeted, and that item is there largely as a reference point. Our multi-year projection, which we do show for the 3 to 5 years out, assumes a revenue decrease of 3.6 million. We are assuming that the revenue that we receive from the state for the court-ordered voluntary transfer of students from Ravenswood into our district will be going away because of the change in the funding model for the Ravenswood City School District. And then, of course, any state budget decisions that come out with the May revision or later that may also impact the district's budget, and we will be incorporating those items into our budget as we learn about them. And that concludes the update on tonight's budget assumptions, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. I understand that Dr. Austin would like to make a comment before we turn to public comment and board questions. Dr. Austin?
Yeah, thank you. So many jokes about being on Zoom and getting to make a comment about a presentation. I'll start with Ms. Chow. Good job. Thank you. Just a few thoughts, and I took a few notes even during the presentation. First of all, our district is in a great position in that we have enough money to do anything, there's a comma, but not everything. And this process is a way of prioritizing the work ahead of us. And I'll tell you from a staff perspective, I feel like we're a month behind. Ms. Chow will feel like we're 3 months behind, and the rest of the staff will feel like we're 2 months too early. So it's really hard to get everybody's mind in the same place. We have people that are right in the middle of trying to finish the year, but our work right now has to be focused on that. How are we lining up for next year? A couple things, because if I was watching this presentation without additional context, I'd be writing a story tomorrow that all of our school district is getting 6 elementary school counselors. That is not how this works. So I just want to temper expectations here. Our thinking right now is that the addition of 6 elementary counselors could be a really nice piece to a puzzle to try to improve supports at the elementary level. That does not mean that is our final recommendation or that plan is fully baked right now. It means this is the point where we need to start getting it in front of you so that we can have a more detailed conversation about, in that particular case, the value potential of counselors at the elementary level and what that might mean to something like our CASI counselors or other services that we use. So I just don't want people to read this and say, PAUSD is doing the following. It's not true. Productive play is an example. It's one of my favorite examples, by the way, because I'm so happy with the way that it's gone this year, with how we were able to take an internal candidate that had a track record of doing amazing work with elementary school students at Ohlone in the SEL area, and we're able to scale him up. The problem is we did it with one-time money. And we did it with one-time money because that's how the state gave us the funds. And now we fell in love with something. The only way to keep it is to put it into the budget, which comes through a budget assumption, which means it now comes out of a different pot of money. Job coaches at the VA program, I'm only hitting a few of these, by the way. Job coaches at the VA program have been requested since before my arrival. For people that are familiar with the BA program, it is one of the most beautiful things we do. The two-way relationship there is incredible, but that is not something newly added because we have some new funding source. This has been a request every single year. This is the year it made it onto our priority list. Ravenswood, and I'm glad Ms. Chow brought up Ravenswood. Ravenswood funding could change dramatically for us. It is also being negotiated, so I don't want to unnecessarily panic us. It's Ms. Chow's job to budget for the worst case scenario. That makes her our CBO. Part of my job is to continue to negotiate through the process with, in this case, largely, in fact, almost entirely, it is entirely San Mateo County, trying to work with a resolution with a neighboring district whose funding mechanism has changed dramatically since the original order. So again, the budget's going to reflect that it goes away. The reality is we're hoping that there's a compromise to be found. And the final thought, and I think Ms. Chow did a really nice job, the 1%, we should just consider 1% being roughly $2 million. And that does not mean that we're budgeting a 1% total compensation package. That is 1%, and there'll be some multiple of that, is not a different pocket of money that we're talking about. That will be factored in with all of these other things. And as she pointed out, the 22-23 negotiation process has not even begun yet. So it is not budgeted. So that was it. I just wanted to land a little bit of additional context and thank our team again for this preliminary work.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. We have one public speaker before we turn to board comments. That is Meb Steiner joining us on Zoom. Ms. Steiner.
Thank you. Good evening. Meb Steiner, President of CSEA Chapter 301. I want to start off with a thank you for the presentation and also a thank you for the priorities. I feel that we have partnered with the district, with Dr. Austin, with Mr. Bahadur Singh, with Ms. Lay, to really talk about some of the needs and give perspective from CSEA's side as well. Many of these priorities and many of these asks are classified jobs. And I think it really shows how important our classified staff are to serve our students and our school community. So I just want to highlight that. Again, I echo Ms. Chow. Our food service folks have been amazing. I said that at the last board meeting, and I want to say it again. It cannot be said often enough. You know, we're talking doubling the meals next year. And if you look at the amount that, that we're asking for, it's, less than $200,000, which is not a small sum of money, but just a huge bang for the buck. And I say that very often about classified staff. I appreciate that, we've had these discussions and been able to have the back and forth. Another huge area that I think that we are focusing on is differentiating some of our special education aids to really meet the wide range of needs of our students and make sure we have folks in the right places with the right training and the desire to work there. And I appreciate the stipends we've been able to offer as sort of a first step in that direction. Very much appreciate, offering something to our bus drivers, so critical for our students and getting them here safely to school. I over and over say our most valuable resource are our people. Our buildings and programs are nothing without them. And I want to say that I feel many of these assumptions here recognize that and put that priority on investing in our people to bring them out. We desperately need health techs. We desperately need the mental health support. And I want to end with one request, that as we add those folks, our health techs and our mental health supports as well, that we also think about how we support them and all of our employees. You know, they are always there for our mental health. My question is, who is there for theirs? So I look forward to also investing in, you know, programs to support our employees as well as our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Steiner. Comments or questions from board members? Ms. DeBrienza.
Thanks. Thank you for this. It's really nice to see you start really early on in the year with our overall budget assumptions and now bringing in real clear descriptions of our ads that we want to see. I'm really happy to see most of these. The bus driver benefits seem sort of long overdue in that clearly it's hopefully it's what's needed to really make the difference here. And I'm thrilled to see the productive play is going to be ongoing. The sustainability education TOSA, I assume that is someone, you and I often go to the sustainability committee meetings. And so point 4 seems like the right start to you. I think of all the things that they're always asking us, who's doing this, who's doing that. And is that your starting point? Or are you just throwing that? I tend to think that maybe point 6 might make more sense, but I'm curious you guys are thinking point 4.
What we have been doing so far, because we have a bit of gap in the roles and responsibilities in filling them, and we have had other staff fill some of these roles. And one of the things that continuously comes up at that meeting is the piece in which we do the education the ongoing education to the schools, to the students, about the value of the various programs in that sustainability, that fall under that whole sustainability umbrella. So I think that with the point 4 can capture that. Some of that we have been able to assign to other staff, but the education piece has been difficult. So it just seemed to fall under the TOSA range quite nicely, and the point 4 is the recommendation.
For the education piece. Okay, I'll be interested to see, I guess, if we do settle on that and how that goes with the other work. That's not the education piece, but the other stuff that you said staff is trying to pick up in other ways. I'm asking this about the SWIFT budget, but I think this kind of goes for everything. We're going to be approving our promise, and my assumption, I'm assuming all of our assumptions, is that whatever you need to meet the goals of the promise, you are budgeting for, right? Like you said, the whole SWIFT budget isn't here in SWIFT. It falls in lots of places, and our Every Child a Reader falls in lots of different places. But I hope, given as Dr. Austin just mentioned, that we've got the money to do the things we want to do. I assume we're not cutting corners here, and whatever we need to do it right, we're going to see proposed in the budget, right?
So as I mentioned earlier, when staff met to get together to look at their budgets and moving forward for next year, it really was a very thoughtful process. And the amount of detail that went into their individual budgets was very well outlined. And so I feel that we have the information that we need to go forward with what we're proposing, and we're proposing these at the amount that is necessary to accomplish our goals.
Good, okay. And I'm really happy to see a middle school math in there too, just because I know we made some big changes, right? That started right when COVID hit. And so I want to make sure that we give our sort of new design a fair shake and make sure that we make it as successful as we can make it. So one last question, health technicians. Are those nurses? What are people administering medicine?
So we have several levels of health support staff. We have health clinicians, and then we have health technicians. So a lot of times the difference is their certification. RNs, LVNs, some of the responsibilities and services they provide for students. So the health technicians is the position. And these would, one thing to point out too is none of these recommendations would involve replacing, eliminating any positions. So any changes to staffing would be done through attrition, retirement, things like that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate all the whole cabinet work on this.
Ms. Latimer.
Can I just follow up really quick on Ms. DeBriente's question? So I think what I'm interpreting that means then we talk a lot about there's a school nurse shortage nationwide. And so I assume what we're trying to do is have people who aren't nurses cover as many of the duties of nurses as possible. So the very limited resource of nurses can do sort of their bullseye of what we really need them to do, because no one else can do it. Do I have that right?
Correct, but we also, there's still licensed professionals. It's that, you have RNs, LVNs, the different roles of certification. So we have multiple job descriptions, and what we're trying to do is, in some cases, we've had to work with outside agencies because we've been unable to meet the same demand that, some of our in private sector and hospitals and all that. So we're trying to be creative in creating more options, as well as work with the associations to see if there's, opportunities for hiring incentives, recruitment. I know our Rosemary Dow, our district nurse, has done quite a bit of work with the county they're having the same issue, trying to recruit people into the profession. So we're exploring all options.
Any other comments or questions from board members, student board members? I had one question on the mental health ads. We had talked, I think last time, about the general issue that the district is facing in terms of, adequate staffing for the mental health services that we're providing. And I see this item, and it makes perfect sense to me to add in the area of elementary schools. Does that mean that you think we're adequately funded at the secondary schools level, or do you expect to see other changes there? Or is that something that we should expect to hear more about in the future?
I think that's something that we can expect to hear more about in the future. What I would say is that we probably can't specifically say we're, adequately covered because at the levels right now, because the need is so great. What I can say is what we have looked at is that there is a need in the elementary, and that we don't have the level of counseling support that we do have at the other sites. I'm not to say the secondaries couldn't use more, but the elementary doesn't have counselors right now. So that is why this item was brought forward and targeted at elementary.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear that that makes perfect sense, and I think filling in that gap is a great idea. I was just curious to see how it develops in terms of our understanding of the need at the secondary level for next year, because I think that's still a high priority for everybody. Thank you for all of your hard work on that item, and then let's turn to the next item on our agenda, which is 7E, Human Resources Report. Ms. Hickey, I think.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and
Or
introduce
Mr.
this one,
Bahadur Singh.
President Dauber. As Dr. Austin mentioned, a lot of us are starting to think about planning already for next year, and that's very true for human resources. We are now entering the busiest time of the year for planning, hiring, staffing for next year. So we thought it'd be appropriate to share some information about our current workforce, trends, pathways for staff after joining our district. And to share that information tonight is Ms. Lisa Hickey, the Director of Certificated HR, and Ms. Ann Lay, the Director of Classified HR.
Great.
So, turn it over.
All right. Good evening, members of the board. We are pleased to be here tonight to share with you current information and priorities from the Human Resources Department. This first slide gives you an overview of our workforce. We have approximately 2,200 employees, and that's comprised of our hourly CSEA, PAEA, and management employee groups. If you look at our number of employees, we do have less employees this year compared to last year, and that's due to decreased student enrollment. One of the main goals of our PAUSD promise in the area of human resources is increasing diversity in our workforce. And while that's an ongoing priority, we are seeing growth in this area as we compare our demographics from for this year compared to last year. This next slide shows the number of new hires as well as resignations and retirements for the last 2 years. This school year, we had 72 hires, new hires and certificated teachers, and that's compared to 48 hires from last year. It's important to remember that last spring, we did offer the Supplemental Retirement Plan, SRP, and we had almost 40 certificated teachers take advantage of that, and that, of course, resulted in increased hires. When we look at the resignations and retirement numbers, it is also important to know that that also includes some temporary teachers that we may not have had a position for the following year due to the decreased student enrollment, as well as occasionally we will have a teacher who's been on a full year leave of absence who actually resigns at the end of the year. We are already preparing for next year. We have 2 recruitment events coming up. We are holding our own PAUSD job fair that will be a virtual event on March 16th. Last year we held our first one on Zoom and we had about 150 participants. We'll also be participating in the Santa Clara County Office of Education Career Fair, which will be in person on March 26th. In addition to that, we are participating in a few career fairs that are held by universities, and we will be attending both Stanford and Fresno State in the next few weeks. This slide shows openings and positions from last year, and the number of applicants that we had in each of our positions or pools. The top of the list shows positions that attract more applicants. If you look at the certificated side, you can see that elementary teacher still has quite a number of applicants. As you go further down the list, you see that there are less applicants and are harder to fill positions for certificated that would be in the area of special education.
In classified service, you'll notice at the top, custodial, business, maintenance, secretarial, and campus supervision were easier positions for us to fill. As we go down the list, food service, instructional aides, mental health, student attendance, business, bus drivers, and school nurses were a challenge, as you know, national shortages, and as we've been discussing tonight, nursing shortages. We worked with our partners in CSEA to negotiate MOU for stipends for special education student attendance. And then again, we've already talked tonight about the benefits for 7-hour bus drivers for full-time benefits.
Great. This next slide shows a graphic representation of the pathway for our new hires to become permanent employees in PAUSD. So for certificated teachers, there's 2 pathways, and it really depends on the position and credential held. For example, there are more teachers who are on full or partial leave in our K-5 classroom teachers and certain secondary single subject positions. So as a result, some of those teachers may spend the first 2 years in a temporary status, temporary 1, temporary 2. By the 3rd year, they would be moved to probationary 2, and then they would become permanent at the beginning of the 4th year. Special education teachers and certain secondary single subjects might begin in PAUSD as a probationary 1 teacher their first year, moving to probationary 2 their 2nd year, and then becoming permanent at the beginning of their 3rd year. No matter what pathway they are on with their status, we have a really robust teacher induction program that supports all of our new teachers who are new to the career and do not have a clear credential yet the first 2 years.
So classified has a much more streamlined process. All new hires that come in used to be a 12-month probationary period. California Assembly Bill 1353 changed that probationary period to 6 months. After 6 months, employees become permanent status. So we heard the board's feedback about collecting exit feedback from our employees. So we took our paper process for resignations and retirements, worked with our partners in IT to make it a digital platform. So resignations now go through Laserfish, where employees can resign. After resignation, an exit survey is sent to them. There are some of the questions that we have up there that is sent to the employees for them to respond. They also have the opportunity to summarize and give us feedback about their positions. Currently, we have about 50 employees that have responded to our survey. Many of them who are leaving the district or moving out of the area. We have many classified staff going into certificated positions, and then due to the pandemic, some have left due to health concerns. Opportunities for advancement. So as I said before, classified staff moving into certificated positions. Primarily that is, we've had student attendance through the Santa Clara County Office of Education EPIC program, get credentialed and become our special education teachers. We've had some of our instructional aides become K-5 teachers. That number as of today should be 10 up there for 21-22. Classified staff to confidential supervisory and management positions, there are about 5. We have supervisor and registration services, behavior support manager, transportation supervisor, and a health services coordinator. PAEA, 2 employees moved up to become assistant principal and SPED coordinator.
And of course, we are already planning for staffing for next year. And these are kind of some priority areas in certificated and classified. And as Ms. Chow shared in her previous budget assumptions presentation, for certificated staff, we are exploring hiring counselors at the elementary level to support our K-5 students, as our secondary schools already have counselors supporting students both academically and socio-emotionally.
So for classified, as we talked tonight about health services, so just to clarify, health technicians we have already at our secondary sites. We're looking at about approximately, this is just discussion right now, it's 6 health technician positions for elementary to support the diabetic care of our students. These positions are actually, these employees are LVNs, so they're not RNs, but they're LVNs, so they can support this work. As you know, we've said tonight, the challenges of filling our nurses' positions. Meb Steiner spoke tonight about us continuing our work with our student attendants to try to differentiate the positions and try to compensate our employees for the work they're doing. Continuing our work in transportation and obviously food service for all their incredible work that they are doing to support our students in the meals that they are providing. So we just want to thank the board and Dr. Austin for the opportunity to present to you tonight, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for a very informative presentation. We have a couple of public comments before we take any questions or comments from the board. First is Meb Steiner via Zoom. Ms. Steiner.
Good evening. I mostly want to just express a thank you to both Ms. Hickey and Ms. Lee, especially Ms. Lee. She and I work very, very closely together with the classified staff and also Mr. Bahadur Singh. We have weekly meetings to discuss issues, and I really appreciate the partnership. It is a real pleasure to work with them, particularly Ms. Lee. It's just really wonderful. The communication is excellent, and it's a great sharing of ideas. Classified is complicated. The probationary period is streamlined, but all of the rest is far more complex. We hire kind of throughout the year. There's so many different positions. There's, over 125 different job descriptions in our contract. And I will say that we are a pretty diverse group of people. So our diversity is much more representative actually of our student body. So I'm excited to hear that we are improving on all fronts there. I would urge us to think of diversity in the most broad sense, not just racial or ethnic, but also in other areas, socioeconomic or lived experience, or what sort of school path one took. Or was it more of a hands-on training approach? So I really encourage us to think of that. Professional development, I think, would be really wonderful. It could help us leverage our folks and sort of spread it. As Dr. Austin talked about the play model, this was a staff member, and then we sort of spread the love to have it at different sites. The areas of focus I think are great that we are focusing on, and a lot of that has been in communication. I wish we could do it all, but I'm very pleased, with the priorities that are appearing here. I do also want to give a special shout out to our IT team, because as Ms. Lay shared about the exit survey, this is what our amazing IT team does. And I urge us to think also about how much we have put on them through COVID, and to give them support at the sites too. We're just using a lot more technology. So that's another critical area where I really hope we can add to our folks. But once again, thank you to all of our staff, teachers, certificated managers, especially classified, and special thanks to the HR team who I love to work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Steiner. Next speaker is Vaibhav Vaish, and excuse me if I've mispronounced your name, on Zoom. Mr. Vaish.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bahadur Singh and team, for sharing such a wonderful report on the most critical resource, the people who serve our children. And, being a Palo Alto parent, when you give me something wonderful, I'll ask for more. So I really hope a report like this can be a regular feature a couple of times a year. It would be really nice to see, other information such as how competitive our benefits are with neighboring districts from whom we have to compete for this precious resource. I also want to give a thanks to you and to CSEA and Ms. Steiner for being flexible and agile to differentiate positions like bus drivers and students' attendants and giving them extra benefits and stipends. The one area of concern is special education staffing. It's a hard job, it's hard to fill. I couldn't help see in this report that last year in secondary special ed, we actually had more positions open than candidates. And to me, it raises the question, doesn't that mean like some of our kids could not be served? What's worrying for me is also, I saw earlier under the personnel items and approval on the consent calendar, 5 secondary special ed staff left and 1 school psychologist left, all of them with 2 years or less of service. And that leads a worrying question, right? Like, are we really able to retain the most critical teachers? And are we creating more churn for students? And finally, like, I've noticed that in the 3 board meetings in closed session, there has been a special education litigation settlement approved unanimously by the board in each meeting, totaling to over $500,000. And we're just into the 2nd month of this year. And I'm not smart enough to connect those dots, but can we do better? I really hope that, similar to how we did with classified staff, we can work with our friends in the PAEA to differentiate and properly incentivize our special ed staff. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. I'm super grateful for those we have. I hope we can keep them and get more of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Durop, did you? No? Mr. Branza?
I want to thank you guys so much for collecting these data and giving us this report. It's the kind of information that I think that the board has been curious about for a long time, and you lay out a lot of great information here. So thank you for that. Thank you for collecting exit survey feedback. I really, really appreciate it. 50 is a pretty good start. Hopefully we'll keep growing that over time, and use those data to help make improvements where we think we need to be making them. I also really love seeing the opportunities for advancement within our system. There's a whole bunch of people in this room today who have advanced up through our system, and clearly they were good moves that our administration made. And it's nice to see that we are taking our PAUSD family and supporting them in different roles if that's their goal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Any further thoughts from staff? Okay, thank you so much for this item. And then let's turn to our information items, which we don't take up individually or with presentations, but they're in the packet. And if any board members want to comment or question on any of these, we can do that. Looks like the answer on that is no.
Just to thank you for the reports. It's
Yes.
good information for us to have.
Yes, thank you
and
so
elevate.
much. Then let us turn to board operations. Any reports from board members on board operations? Anything? Seeing none, that is our final item. So I want to appreciate the work from staff. I don't think we necessarily say this enough. I think Mr. Branza commented on this, but this meeting particularly, I think, was evidence of a huge amount of staff work, very nicely done and well presented. And I want to appreciate that because it was quite remarkable, the range and depth of the work that was done. So thank you very much, and we're adjourned.